The Trudeau government's narrative about its decision to invoke the Emergencies Act continues to crumble, and Polyev derangement syndrome reaches a new level in the legacy media. It's Fake News Friday. I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is The Candice Malcolm Show. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into the podcast this week. And as usual, I am joined by my colleague, Harrison Faulkner, producer at True North and a journalist as well. Harrison, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Candice.
So we have a couple of announcements, some big changes, big news happening here at True North. We continue to grow. We continue to reach more and more Canadians every single week, every single month. The growth that we've seen so far in 2020 is truly astonishing. We've nearly doubled our size since last year. And last year was also a great year for us. We covered the election. We continue to grow. We hit all kinds of new metrics. So we just continue to grow. I think there's so many Canadians out there who have an appetite for something different from the legacy media. They like the independence of True North. They don't want to have talking points crammed down their throat, and they see that there is something wrong with the way that the media tells a story. So just to say, we're really happy with the direction True North is going. And again, to the audience, people tuning in, just thank you so much for your support, for continuing to tune in, to share our stories. Those who financially support us, we are incredibly grateful. We receive all of our money from our viewers. We don't take money from the government. We don't take the Trudeau government's bailout grants. We're not involved in any of those schemes. So the way that we are funded is entirely by people who appreciate our journalism, enjoy our reports, and put their wallets where they're back it up with their wallets, and we truly do appreciate that. So Harrison, we have a couple of new podcasts that we are introducing. Folks might have seen Rupa Subramanya. She launched her own podcast. We're incredibly overjoyed to be joined by her at the network. She's a writer over at the National Post and a freelance journalist, and she does some great work. She lives in Ottawa, and she covered the trucker convoy, I think, better than just about anybody. So she had her first episode this week. If you haven't tuned in already, go check that out right after you watch this show. It was really, really great. She talked about the World Economic Forum and sort of drilling down into what they do, what they want to do, and same with the World Health Organization, talking about these two supposedly taboo topics that we're not supposed to talk about. These really, powerful lobby groups, essentially, that want to coordinate global policy. So Rupert does a deep dive into that. And then we're really pleased yesterday to release another brand new show. This one hosted by you, Harrison Faulkner, Ratioed. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your new show, Harrison?
Yeah, so it is basically going to be a social media commentary show. We're going to go into some of the worst takes of the week, some of the cringiest social media posts. We're going to laugh, make fun of some of these posts, and we're also going to provide some much needed commentary. I made this point on the show yesterday, Candice, that social media really is the new cultural battleground for these issues. And I think True North recognizes that and wants to make sure that our audience can get some good coverage on what's going on these social media feeds, because I mean, there's just so much content. As you know, when we have this show every week, we pretty much have too much content to get into. So we're going to try and tackle that issue by creating this new show, Ratioed. So I'm super excited to have the opportunity and really looking forward to having the show grow and be a serious part of what we offer here at True North.
Well, we're all really excited about it, Harrison. You're part of Generation Z, or I don't know what you call yourselves, Gen Z or iGen. And I think part of the interesting thing about your show is tapping into the sort of zeitgeist among your generation, pointing out some of the sort of very extreme woke ideology that does exist in your age group, which is, I don't think, the norm. I don't think that's the sort of where the average moderate young Canadian is, but sort of seeing the sort of stuff that they put out there about themselves and sort of how out of tune it is with the rest of the Canadian population. Tell us about the title, Ratioed. What does that mean?
Well, so Ratioed is basically when a social media post gets way more comments or way more quote tweets, than likes. So it basically is the one big indicator that you missed the mark on social media if your post gets ratioed. And I think, Candice, you raise a good point there about how this is what our generation is talking about. We are paying attention now to what these, frankly, you could call them, there are radicals out there that are pushing very extreme political agendas on social media, and they have no shame in putting it out there. So we just want to try and talk about it, show people what is being said. And I think the rise of accounts like Libs of TikTok, if you've seen them on Twitter, posting these videos of these teachers talking about gender ideology or what else, whatever sort of radical political movement is in style, usually it gets picked up by these accounts. And there's a real appetite for people to talk about these things and to show people just how insane things are getting in this generation. So, like I said, I mean, I think it's what our audience wants. It's a new opportunity for us to break into a new audience group as well, a new demographic, which I think is valuable for everyone. And I think it's just much needed content. Really looking forward to it.
Well, one of the things that I find really interesting is that the media has really picked up on this woke culture, and they've sort of channeled it, and a lot of them have taken it on, not just media, but big corporations, corporate Canada. You start to see these strange phenomena where, people put their pronouns in their bios, and, all of these sort of woke critical race theory concepts creeping into corporate governance. But at the same time, I noticed that when it comes to polling, right, young Canadians, people in their 20s, were very against the lockdowns. They were the group most likely to support the truckers and support the sentiment behind the truckers. And we've seen with just someone like Pierre Poilievre, the huge reach that he's been able to have with this sort of younger group of Canadians. So I wonder, Harrison, do you think the woke culture sort of represents your generation, or do you think it's a deviation and that it's unfair to categorize all sort of Gen Z Canadians as part of this woke tribe?
So I think it's definitely unfair to put us all into the extreme woke category, because I think that there's a huge rebound effect with all of this. The more extreme you go, the more people will eventually, I guess, get off the ship and realize just what a disaster it was. And you push people to the edges. And I've seen polling and data that shows that the younger generation, a generation even below me, is supposed to be one of the most conservative, because they've been forced to listen to teachers tell them insane things, or they're forced to watch things on TV that they know is just not right. So I think that there's definitely a rebound effect, right? If you keep pushing too far, eventually people are going to come to their senses and realize, actually, hold on, this is actually insane. This is not at all what we want for our society and for our life. And you were right about the trucker convoy, because of course, young people have to get out. They have to get jobs, and they're not going to be getting corporate cushy jobs where they can work from home necessarily. Usually that requires them to maybe working in retail or work at a restaurant. And if you shut everything down, or you force people to, for example, take a vaccine to get a job, that is going to have some sort of negative backlash. And of course, younger people are going to take issue with it when they're the ones that end up paying the price. So I know you've talked about this on your show about how actually the younger generations are oftentimes the most affected by these lockdowns, by these policies. I know that when you talk to Matt Strauss, he said that as well. And I think it's the case that there is, if tapping into the nerve of younger Canadians who are really frustrated, really disappointed by the direction of the country, there's a lot to be done there. And there's a lot of people that want this sort of content.
Well, that's so great. Ratioed with Harrison Faulkner. We're so excited to be hosting that. It's going to be every Thursday. So after you check out this episode, after you check out the Rupa Subramania show, go check out Ratioed with Harrison Faulkner. It's going to air every single Thursday here at True North. And so just final bit of announcements here at True North. So for the last year and a half, the Candace Malcolm Show has run every single day, Monday to Friday, and we've had so much fun putting that together. We are scaling the show back for the time being. So the Rupa Subramania show will fill the block on Tuesday, Ratioed with Harrison Faulkner on Thursday. We're going to be bringing in some new content as well to fill those slots. And part of the reason why is because I'm excited to announce my husband and I are expecting baby number 3 at our household. And so I will be taking time off starting this summer to be with my family, with my newborn, and with my 2 other little kids. So that is why Candace Malcolm Show won't be every day, won't be on at all after July, and we're going to fill the slot in with lots and lots of other content at True North, and then I'll be back on the channel sometime later this year or early next year. And so we're all very, very excited, and we're going to continue to provide lots and lots of content to True North viewers. So with that, let's get to Fake News Friday, Harrison. I think the big story of the week was that the Trudeau government's narrative around the Emergencies Act and around the trucker convoy just continues to crumble every single week, every single day with this national inquiry. We learn things that just don't match with what the Liberals were saying at the time, don't match with the Liberal media narrative that was being spouted at the time. And we have yet another example this week. So this story just came out yesterday. Marco Mendicino, the public safety minister, the media tells us that he was just misunderstood. He was misunderstood when he said that the police asked for the Emergencies Act. So you will recall that Marco Mendicino repeatedly told us that the reason that the government invoked the Emergencies Act wasn't because of Trudeau, it wasn't because of a Liberal decision. It had nothing to do with partisanship, nothing to do with Trudeau's personal hatred for these truckers. It was all just the Liberals were taking advice from law enforcement. And so really it was the law enforcement that made the decision and not the political operatives in the Liberal government. Well, we have heard over and over again now that that's not true. Every single law enforcement official that has taken the stand in this national inquiry has said, no, that's not the case. And so the headline this week isn't that Marco Mendicino was wrong. It wasn't that he lied and he misled the public and he misrepresented the situation. It wasn't even that he misspoke. It's that he was misunderstood. So he didn't have the misunderstanding. You did. He was misunderstood. And this is according to an official in the bureaucracy in his department. Everyone is covering for this Liberal government. It is truly wild. So we put together some clips for you. First of all, this is a clip of Marco Mendicino, who repeatedly said that the reason that the government invoked the Emergencies Act is because they were just following what the law enforcement said. Here is that clip.
We invoked the act because it was the advice of nonpartisan professional law enforcement.
That's the reason why we had to invoke the Emergencies Act, and we did so on the basis of nonpartisan professional advice from law enforcement.
We were following the advice of various levels of law enforcement, including the RCMP.
After calling upon the police forces, we invoked the Emergency Measures Act.
We wanted to be sure at bottom that we were giving law enforcement all of the tools and the resources that they needed.
It was only after police told us that they needed this special power.
The Ontario Association, the Canadian Association, law enforcement was very strong. I don't want to speak for every last serving member of law enforcement, but there was a very strong consensus that we needed to invoke the act.
A strong consensus that we need to invoke the act. You can hear him say it over and over again, that it wasn't his decision, Harrison. It wasn't the Liberal government. It wasn't anything to do with petty politics. He was just taking advice from the people who run the law enforcement side of things. Do you think he was misunderstood? What do you think of this take from the media?
Well, Candace, I don't know how many times you can be misunderstood before it turns on the person saying it. It's not us who is misunderstood about what he's saying. He seems to be mistaken about the actual course of events that he was a part of. I mean, how many times have we seen this? I've been all over the inquiry and posting clips on my Twitter trying to get the message out there, because one thing I've noticed is that aside from what we're covering here, Candace, there's not a lot of coverage happening on the inquiry. People are not reacting to the fact that, as you said at the beginning, Trudeau's narrative is totally crumbling apart. And just because the minister can say that he acted on the basis of law enforcement and the request of law enforcement. But if the RCMP commissioner, if the Ottawa police chief, the former Ottawa police chief who was fired because he wasn't doing enough, and the Gatineau mayor all say that they didn't request the government to invoke the Emergencies Act, and they confirm it in the inquiry, then it's clear, Candace, that this narrative is obviously just not the case. What Trudeau is trying to do is find a scapegoat. What the minister is trying to do is find a scapegoat other than himself to pin the blame on this horrible mistake, to invoke this ridiculous measure. I think unfortunately for Marco Mendicino, he may be the one that gets thrown under the bus, because this inquiry has definitely not gone the way the Liberals wanted it to. It seems that they're going into it. They appointed the Liberal justice, right? The former Liberal staffer who's now a judge, to head the inquiry. And they had this probably mapped out in their minds about how they're going to get out of it. They're going to immediately start pinning the blame on the far right, on the extremists, as they tried many times. And it hasn't gone that way. The Bloc, the NDP even, and the Conservatives, of course, and even the senators, almost all the senators on the inquiry have been taking the Liberals to task over this and expose their narrative.
Well, we have a clip of those officials that you did mention, so you can juxtapose what the minister is on camera saying repeatedly, that it was law enforcement that advised him, and then now let's look at what those law enforcement agents say when they were asked to testify in front of this inquiry. Here's that clip.
As a law enforcement agency with primacy for national security, did you ask the government or representatives for the invocation of the Emergencies Act?
No, there was never a question of requesting the Emergency Act. There was a question.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I'm sorry. So you never asked for it. Do you know of any other police leadership that asked specifically the government for the invocation?
No, we actually reached out to various police agencies when there was talk about some of the authorities within that they were proposing, and of course we were consulted.
Did the Ottawa Police make a request to the federal government to invoke the Emergencies Measures Act, yes or no?
So we were involved in conversations with our partners and with the political ministries. We didn't make a direct request for the Emergencies Act.
I'm wondering if you could confirm whether the city of Gatineau or its police services requested the federal government to invoke the Emergencies Act during the Freedom Convoy.
Merci pour votre question, Madame Bloch.
Thank you very much for my question. No, the city of Gatineau did not declare an emergency or request the act, but it did provide considerable support to the RCMP.
Did yourself or anyone in the OPS request the invocation of the Emergency Act?
I did not make that request. I'm not aware of anybody else in the Ottawa Police Service who did.
So no one made the request. No one's aware of anyone who made the request. And to me, it kind of comes back to media coverage, because at the time, no one was holding this government to account. They had all bought into this idea that there was some kind of a January 6th moment coming in Canada, and that these people were truly reprehensible. They were white supremacists. They were probably all murderers, and this needed to stop. So the media allowed them to get away with this. And now, where it's time for some accountability, you're right, Harrison, they hardly cover this, right? It's not prime time. It's not being covered on the news. You go to CBC, National Post, Globe and Mail, any of these websites, they barely ever talk about it. And when they do, they run stories like this. So this was over in the Canadian press, and they just repeat what the Liberals want everyone to know. Mendicino was misunderstood when he said, please ask for the Emergencies Act. According to this official, it was all misunderstanding. So they can't even bring themselves to say Mendicino is contradicted, Mendicino is caught in a lie, Mendicino's dishonesty is coming out. No, none of that. Just, again, very mild, very, understated. He was just misunderstood. It wasn't even him that had the misunderstanding. It was you, the public, or you, the media, or it was someone else. It was Canadians who misunderstood, not the minister. So absolutely no accountability from the legacy media in the way that they are covering this. And you made this point a couple weeks ago on the show, Harrison. I think it's worth repeating that if this was in the U.S., if there was some kind of a unprecedented use of the authority of the federal government, suspending civil rights as much as you can in this country, using the entire force of the federal government, suspending all kinds of other charter issues and everything, and then there was an inquiry into it, it would be prime time. It would be on all of the news channels. It would be a huge story, especially if it was against a conservative government or a Republican government in the U.S. I mean, we have an example of this right now. There is a inquiry in the U.S. into the January 6th riots. This happened 18 months ago. We pretty much have already gotten to the bottom of it and litigated it. A bunch of people have gone to jail. 200 idiots stormed the Capitol, and they're still dwelling on it, right? And it is prime time. The Democrats down there are trying to make it into this huge midterm election issue. Again, compare that to here in Canada, where the Trudeau government did something really unprecedented. This Emergencies Act had never been used before. It's supposed to be there for wartime, for an invasion or some kind of internal uprising, and yet basically no accountability. It's such a stark difference in how the media treat Liberals versus how they treat Conservatives.
Completely. And again, going back to the narrative that the law enforcement requested the act, if the US government told the Canadian government to do this, or if the province of Ontario told the Canadian government to do this, why not say that? Just say to Canadians, in fact, we were instructed by the provinces and we were instructed by the United States to do this. Would that be fair justification? Likely not. But if that's the justification, if that's the truth, come out there and say it. Don't pin the blame on the cops, who will then just tell the actual truth to the people and say, no, we didn't request it. And like you said, Candace, again, if this was a January 6th style committee, then the Liberals would be doing a lot better than they are. I mean, the January 6th committee to this day they just basically shackled a former Trump office administrator in an airport and did it in public and brought him in, basically put him into the brig because he was subpoenaed by the January 6th committee and didn't show up. So again, there's a total difference, right? The media coverage of the January 6th committee and the actions of that committee are basically taking place, and they're actually, making serious headway, if you want to call it that. And this committee, which I think was designed to prop up the Liberal narrative, is totally failing. I mean, it's just exposing the entire debacle that was the Emergencies Act. And throughout this whole time, Candace, we have to go through this long list of narratives that the Liberals have put out there about the Emergencies Act or about the events in Ottawa that have since crumbled. I mean, we can just go down the list. Let's start with the wealthy donors. From March 18, 2022, Blacklocks reported that, in fact, the wealthy foreign donors, Blacklocks reported that, in fact, it was Canadians who donated. This line about it all being from the American ultra-rich right wing is not the case. It was proven false. Another one, the RCMP saw no evidence of terrorist financing. So again, we were told this is a terrorist act of foreign funding to incite some sort of government government takeover. Turned out to be false. Again, the next one, the convoy was funded by Canadians, not foreigners. Like I said, they said the convoy was funded by the Americans and by people from around the world, and it was actually just funded by the grassroots. FinTrack, the financial advisor, they said that they told the government that there was no ideologically motivated violent extremism that was funding the event. I mean, I'm not even going to go down the list. I mean, there's so many of them. The firearms at Coots, the arson attempt in Ottawa, the woman who danced on the War Monument. Again, all of these sorts of things, all the attempt by the Liberals to paint this convoy as something it wasn't, are all starting to unravel.
There was never anything there anyway, and we knew that in real time. We were watching the convoy. The media were reporting on it. It was like a totally different event. Whatever they were watching, they were cherry picking the craziest people they could find and blowing stories out of proportion that were easily debunkable at the time, and they have since been debunked. And I'm very grateful for True North for going through and documenting that, so that we have it on record. That just about every major narrative that the legacy media spun up from the trucker convoy has turned out to be wrong. And right, when they created this national inquiry, the point was, why did the Trudeau government use this tool that should have never been used? Let's look into why the government used it. Of course, Trudeau and his Liberal spin doctors and his friends in the media painted it as if, no, the purpose of this inquiry is to look into the truckers and try to find out what their motives were and their ties to violent extremism and terrorism or whatever. And so they set it up that way in the media, as if this was a national inquiry into the truckers rather than a national inquiry into the politicians who used the full force of government against the truckers. And then to your point that you made about how Marco Mendicino maybe ending up being thrown under the bus, it's like, they created this show trial and it's kind of backfiring on them, because all of the information that comes out they keep shooting themselves in the foot. It keeps becoming incredibly evident and obvious to Canadians that there was no real justification, that it was all spin, it was all smoke and mirrors. And they continue to play this game. Harrison, the latest this past week again, is that the government is now hiding behind cabinet confidentiality. So we've seen this over and over again, Harrison, where first we had the Attorney General, David Lametti, who basically just refuses to answer questions. And whenever he's pressed, he says, look, that's confidential. It's protected under cabinet confidentiality. I guess I thought that line works so well that even Brenda Lucki, who is the RCMP commissioner, tried to use it. The only problem, of course, is that Lucki's not part of cabinet, so she wouldn't have cabinet confidentiality. We have some clips here of, as you can see, just more obfuscation, refusing to answer basic questions, refusing to be clear and honest with the public about why they used, again, this unprecedented tool in the government powers, and fortunately getting called out a little bit by conservatives on the committee. So let's play that clip.
Is that correct? I'm not going to betray cabinet confidence. And so the financing measures came into place.
In those consultations, did you consult with provincial attorneys general?
There were, we did have a consultation report. There were, again, I'm not going to betray cabinet confidences.
And I would ask that you undertake to provide the analysis and the information that you were made aware of, that you relied upon to be part of making the invocation for this particular Emergencies Act, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Motz. I understand the sentiment behind the question, and I certainly share the goal of transparency. I think Canadians will understand that cabinet confidence is a critical part of our cabinet governance system.
You know, I can't get into the details of specific discussions, but I can say that, yeah.
Why can't we get into the details, Commissioner? Sorry.
Well, because they were within cabinet, and I'm bound by that cabinet confidence. But I can talk about in general. I provided the situational report, which would have provided them the details that they needed to come up with some of the measures.
Are you still maintaining solicitor and client privilege? Are you willing to waive that?
Well, I'm also bound by cabinet confidence as well.
You're not part of the cabinet. You're not part of that confidence.
No, but I am when I provide them information in cabinet.
To be continued. Oh, do I?
Seconds.
Oh.
Go ahead.
You're not part of cabinet. You're not an elected official. So why are you hiding behind cabinet confidentiality? Canadians
point of
want
order,
to
Madam
know.
Chair, I would just request that the questions go through the chair rather than directly to the witness.
I didn't think we were that formal, Madam Chair, that we had to say through the chair.
We weren't before the badgering, but now we are.
The question. We stopped the clock. Okay, we'll go ahead. It's 37 seconds.
Why do you feel you are bound by cabinet confidentiality as an unelected official?
When I'm providing information within cabinet, I'm bound by the rules of cabinet.
Are you part of the Liberal government, Ms. Lucky?
Not at all.
Are you a donor to the Liberal Party?
No.
You sure about that?
I'm sure.
Are you still citing cabinet confidentiality?
Yes.
So, Candace, as you can see there, they just have no interest in wanting to get to the bottom of the facts. They have no interest in trying to tell the truth. You saw David Lametti there basically say the same thing in maybe 5 different ways, that, yeah, he understands that you want the answers. He understands Canadians deserve the truth, but he's not going to give it to us. He's going to hide behind cabinet confidence, cabinet confidentiality, as he says. He doesn't want to divulge or break cabinet confidence. And again, right at the end, you saw RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki try to hide behind cabinet confidence too, almost as if she kind of wishes she was a part of cabinet, but she's not. That's just the truth. She's a public servant, unelected, and whose job it is to do good by the people of Canada, not to serve the Prime Minister at the time. That's not the role of the RCMP Commissioner. The RCMP Commissioner is to basically lead the federal police service and protect Canadians. And part of that is telling the truth. And rightly, Larry Brock of the Conservative Party, who's a part of the committee, and I have to say as well, both Conservatives on the committee, Glenn Motz and Larry Brock, have both done an excellent job at trying to hold people's feet to the fire here. He just basically told Brenda Lucki straight up, "You're not part of cabinet. Why do you think you can hide behind cabinet confidence? You know, you're not actually bound by this cabinet confidence, so you have a duty to tell the truth." But again, that doesn't work for Brenda Lucki. And then, of course, Candace, they tried it one too many times. Chalk it up as another win for the truckers. The committee, headed by a Liberal justice, as we talked about before, is now telling the government that actually we are going to request these documents. We do have a duty to understand what the government knew at the time and why they invoked the act. So as you can see here, on June 3rd, True North wrote about the fact that the public inquiry was now telling the government, we're going to request these documents from you. We have to get to the bottom of what's going on. So again, it's another L for Trudeau and the Liberals. Their narrative is crumbling, and their attempts to obfuscate, their attempts to hide, are being called out by the Liberal justice they handpicked to lead this process. So it's really all falling apart for them, Candace.
Well, it's good to see someone is holding the Liberal government to account. It's too bad that our legacy media have no interest in covering it, and which is why, I'm grateful for True North. Well, Harrison, I want to talk about Polyev derangement syndrome. We had an entire episode of the show on it a few weeks ago, and it continues to thrive. And so I covered this on my show earlier this week in an interview with Hamish Marshall, where we talked about how the Conservative numbers have just blown everyone's figures out of the park. 600,000 members. Pierre Polyev claims 311,958 on his website alone. This is dwarfing any previous leadership race, any previous number of memberships sold by a political party. And it's so interesting to see how the media narrative has been proven wrong, Harrison, because remember at first when we saw those big rallies at the Pierre Polyev campaign, the media sort of tried to downplay it. They tried to dismiss it. First they said that, these big rallies are really just, riding the coattails of the trucker convoy, that these people aren't partisan, they're never going to sign up for members, that Pierre's campaign is really disorganized and they wouldn't be able to have the groundwork. Well, that was all proven wrong based on this claim from Jenny Byrne, Polyev's campaign advisor, that no, all of those things are wrong. Of course, my favorite narrative about the Pierre Polyev rallies with the media said that they were too white, and that somehow discredited them because of the people, the skin color of the people who go to your rallies apparently can be discrediting. And so it's really interesting, of course, to compare how Polyev and the Conservative leadership race in general, you see the media downplay it, compare it to how they covered Justin Trudeau. A lot of people have been talking about this because back in 2013, Justin Trudeau claimed that his campaign had signed up 150 to 160,000 people, and the media were like blown away. They were celebrating. They thought this was like a tremendous feat, and that it showed how energetic Trudeau's fan base was, and how he was so engaging, and how he had this big, all this momentum, right? Recall that the Liberals don't charge anything for their membership. So all you really had to do is just like get someone to write down their name and email address, and they didn't have to put any skin in the game, right? Compare that to Pierre and the Conservative Party, where you have to pay at least $15. So you're not just some random person off the street. You have to have that level of commitment to say, I'm willing to part with some of my own money to show that I support this candidate. So just so many aspects of what the media had said all along proving to be false, but the media being the media, they just can't let it go. And so they continue along this line, along this reasoning. Almost all of the news stories that I saw about the Conservative numbers, they always say Conservatives claim, or you see it right built into the headline that this is a claim, that it's not verified. Never trust a politician. John Ivison had a piece over in the National Post, and he said that no one really knows the real numbers. It's a good rule of thumb in journalism to never believe anything that politicians or political parties say. You have to be professional skepticism. That's all well and good, and that is all true. You do need to preface it, but the emphasis is there, right? Just compare this to even just a story we just talked about, right? Mendicino's out there changing his story, being contradicted left, right, and center, and the media still runs with whatever the Liberals say. That's the fact. And then whenever a Conservative says something, they always say allegedly, or Conservatives say, or candidates claim, having that suffix there just to say, well, just to plant some doubt in the reader's mind, like we don't really believe this. This is just what they're saying, and that double standard is there. And then we have another piece, Harrison, from our friend Gary Mason over at the Globe and Mail. He wrote the most deranged piece a couple of weeks ago about Pierre Polyev. Well, he continues down that line, so I'll read a little bit from this column. He says, say what you will about Mr. Polyev's policies, many of which range from disturbing to all-out bonkers. His campaign is a well-oiled machine, so he's sort of reluctantly saying that Pierre Polyev is good at his job. Can't help but throwing in that apparently his policies range from disturbing to bonkers. Okay. And he says basically Pierre Polyev's good fortune, his supporters don't see his own hypocrisy. He says, this is my favorite line from the piece, Mr. Polyev is also a phony when it comes to his policies. His oft-stated intention to make Canada the freest country on earth certainly had an appealing ring to the mostly white protesters who participated in the self-described Freedom Convoy earlier this year, to whom he pandered shamelessly. So you can't even come up with anything neutral or I mean, this is just flat out anti-conservative hatred and bigotry masquerading as journalism. What do you make of all this, Harrison?
Well, it totally is, Candice. And I mean, this is just what we've come to expect over these past few months. One thing I just don't really understand, though, is that you're seeing the same amount of, you're seeing the same sort of vitriol and the same amount of negative coverage from the legacy media that you would see directed to people like Maxime Bernier. Pierre Poilievre's campaign is staffed by pretty establishment figures in conservative politics, people who have been around for many years, who have names inside conservative politics, and journalists know that. Pierre Poilievre is not running some outsider anti-establishment campaign. He's very much running from the inside of the Conservative Party. And it just so happens to be that right now, Canada is going through a major moment where we have a leader that has essentially severely damaged the trust of government and people, and has shown them that their charter rights, frankly, aren't that protected. So of course, a good candidate is going to jump on that and make it part of his campaign. But it's just kind of weird to me that the legacy media have decided to attack Pierre Poilievre so much and almost go as far as to put him in the same category as someone like Maxime Bernier. It's kind of surprising to me, knowing who's a part of Pierre's campaign. And of course, we get the usual content from the Canadian press about how it's just a claim that the Conservatives could be lying about this, or they could not be telling the truth. And of course, when you compare that to the coverage that Justin Trudeau gets, or the coverage that the Liberals will get when they have some sort of event like this, it's never the same. Of course, the media wants to take some sort of negative tone toward the Conservatives, because as your show title on Wednesday rightly pointed out, this is frightening for the Liberals. I mean, this is frightening for the legacy media, for Liberals, for the establishment in Canada. They have to reconcile with the fact that I think people are fed up with what they've been given by these people. They don't want to see this sort of constant negative press about them in the media. They don't want to see the government treat them this way. People are fed up, and I think they know their time is coming to an end shortly.
Absolutely. I think that so much of the momentum behind the Poilievre campaign and the conservative movement more broadly is just an absolute dismay and disgust over this Liberal government, over the way that they've been propped up by the NDP, an unelected coalition, the way that the legacy media lies and covers for this government, and the attitude of the Trudeau Liberals. I think there's so many Canadians who are apolitical or nonpartisan, who watch from afar, and they've just had enough. They're sick of it. And that is part of the reason why there is this huge movement. And it's like these elites and these gatekeepers and these Laurentians who they're grasping onto their control of the country, and they're seeing it slip away because people are really waking up to this idea that somehow the Trudeau government is a well-run, respectable government. It certainly isn't. Well, Harrison, we wanted to end the show on a bit of a lighter note. I don't know if this is lighter, if this is depressing, or if it's funny. I find it kind of funny, but the Treasury Board of Canada is promoting this weird new concept that we should all put our pronouns into our email. So this is what the Federal Treasury Board of Canada, the people who, basically the people who let inflation run wild and they look at the state of the finances in our country. You're wondering what is going on over at the Treasury Department. Well, this is what the brain trust over there are spending their time on. Informational videos shaming Canadians and teaching us these good lessons about how we need to be more inclusive. Let's play this clip. So there you have it, Harrison. We would all be better off if we just left the ambiguity aside and put our pronouns right out front and center, so that we can all participate in this weird identity game of sort of the whole gender non-binary gender ideology that's all the rage on the far extreme left. Well, now it's reached the Treasury Board. What did you think when you saw this tweet?
It's such a strange corporate phenomenon, Candice, that basically everyone in a corporate gig or a government gig needs to display their preferred pronouns by their name. I think in pretty much every big company, that is the policy. If you hold out because you don't believe that you have to disclose whether or not whether you go by he, him, or she, her pronouns like a normal person, if you hold out like that, you're going to be pressured into doing it, or you're going to be shamed for not adopting this so-called, well, it's in the name of inclusivity, of course, but you're not allowed to not do it. And now the government is telling you that you have to do it. It's just such a strange thing. I think in hopefully in my lifetime at some point, we're all going to look back at this moment in time and just question what we were thinking. I really hope this is not something that exists for forever, and maybe we can kind of get out of this weird moment that we're living through. And I hope that we do have some time to reflect and say, wow, that's just very strange. Just very strange that we're doing this all of a sudden.
Well, first of all, I find the idea of pronouns like fundamentally arrogant and narcissistic, because you're basically telling other people whom you work with or whom you may interact with, this is how you will refer to me when I'm not around, right? This is how like you will refer to me as she and her. You will not refer to me in any other way. For 99.9% of the population, it's pretty obvious when you interact with someone. This includes trans people, because if you were a man who wanted to appear like a woman, you would dress like a woman and you would want people to refer to you using female pronouns. So the vast, overwhelming majority of people fall into a very easily identified category, he or she. And it's up to the discretion of the person. Sure, sometimes there's some awkward interactions, like the example at the Treasury Board where someone has a gender-neutral name, an ambiguous name. Okay, fine, you have an awkward little interaction like this email that we saw. How is it the end of the world? This idea that everyone must call me what I say. I thought it was a passing trend on social media from a couple of years ago, like when the whole Jordan Peterson, I refuse to be compelled to use pronouns. I really thought that it was kind of going to come and go, but it seems like now it's not just the woke activists, but it's becoming more, like you say, mainstream in corporate and government circles. So we had the Treasury Board here. Why don't you tell us a bit about this WestJet story that's also making headlines in the news?
Well, so of course, when we prep for this show, Candace, the prep has to be, you do have to do a CBC scroll through, because if you're ever short on content, just hit the CBC website and you'll find something immediately. And sure enough, before going to air, we found this really strange CBC article where a transgender advocate calls out WestJet for forcing passengers to identify as male or female. She's very upset about the fact that WestJet is not allowing this woman. I said she. I don't want to misgender anyone, so I want to be careful here. Of course, it'd be horrible to offend someone. But she says that it's a problem because she can't put X on her as her gender, and that because of this, WestJet is violating her human rights. Now, I have to say, I'm a bit of a fan of WestJet over these past few days. The WestJet CEO has been pretty vocal about trying to drop Canada's totally punitive and ridiculous travel restrictions. And then here, the CBC, maybe they're trying to get at WestJet for taking shots at the government. Well, now apparently they're violating people's human rights because they're not allowing them to put X as their gender. God forbid they just want to keep it male and female. Not allowed to do that in mainstream Canadian culture anymore, Candace.
You're right. The CBC is so out of touch. It's so easy to just pop on over to the site and you could do an entire episode just on whatever's on the front page there. But really trying to push these very extreme niche issues, I think, turning most Canadians off in the process, because no one's really jumping up and down saying, yes, someone's human rights are being fundamentally violated because they're not allowed to identify as gender X. That's not really the top. Of all the things going on in the world, we've got inflation, we've got a looming recession, we've got a government with out of control spending, we have a fundamentally unserious prime minister. For all the things to worry about in Canada, not to mention any of the COVID stuff, I don't think that someone not being able to mark X as gender on a WestJet website is really top of mind to most Canadians. Well, I think that's a good point to end it. Harrison, thanks for joining Fake News Friday. We're really excited about your new show, Ratioed with Harrison Faulkner, which airs every Thursday here at True North. So, Harrison, great to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Candace.
All right, that's Harrison Faulkner. I'm Candace Malcolm. It's Fake News Friday on The Candace Malcolm Show.